Whew, things were looking proper rough in that latest video for distance, but you know what? Feeling motivated, ready to head to the field and get some work in. Let's go. Yeah, this looks awful. I'm going back home. Today we are continuing the Get Good at Disc Golf series. Now, something I've been thinking about in my own personal game is as I'm trying to gain distance, there's this overarching problem of all of the work that I've done in the past and these habits that I have built into my game. So, as someone who knows proper form, knows what I'm supposed to be looking for in proper form, and yet is trying to get my body to execute it, the path of which getting those two to connect can often feel a little blurry. And I think that for newer players who are out there with the prevalence of coaches and information that's present, I do think you could form good habits faster. But today, I want to talk about a method that I think is pivotal, especially for those of us who have deeply ingrained habits if we ever want to throw far. And the best part is that you don't have to be like the guy in the intro, hoping for good weather and hoping that when you get to the field it's going to be productive, because we want to talk about how to improve your form while staying at your house and most likely never actually picking up a disc for the first part of it. Now in 2023, I've had the opportunity to play with Josh over from Overthrow multiple times. He's feeling super confident in his game right now, and something I've heard him say in multiple rounds is that, man, I'm so glad all of those shadow throws are finally paying off. For those of you unfamiliar with the concept of a shadow throw, it's where you simply go through the disc golf throwing motion without actually releasing or launching the disc. I also thought it was super interesting in the 2023 Las Vegas Challenge press conference that Holyn Handley mentioned that she was using shadow throws to actually implement form change into her own game. Now, we've talked about this before in a video where I mentioned the idea of learning a new form can be compared to learning guitar or learning an instrument solo, where you want to slow things down to enough of a pace where you're actually getting the motion correct. But oftentimes we want to rush past this phase, feel like we've done one or two shadow swings, gotten the motion down correct, and then head straight into actually feeling the disc release or launch out of our hands. The problem is when we don't get the motions down correctly, we lack the smoothness, which means that we're often going to speed up, which makes us end up throwing it harder than we necessarily need to throw. So we lack the smooth, we lack the speed control, and we're throwing too hard, which all of these are going to relate to things that are not going well for us changing our form or finding proper distance mechanics. So today's video is short and sweet, and it's all about the shadow swing. I really did love that Holyn spent so much time talking about how she was implementing form change into her game, and that one of the biggest ways that she did this was starting with no disc drill, she called it, or shadow swings. Two of the main components were getting as many reps in as possible and filming as many of those reps as possible. It's one thing to go and try to practice a motion over and over again, thinking that it could feel right, but another thing we've talked about on this channel before, and you hear all over the golf world, is feel versus real. While I can feel like I'm doing the motion correct, even when I sent some of my form stuff to my coach, Mike Strauss, he definitely greeted me with a, yeah, we got a lot to work on still. While I felt like some of the stuff I was doing was correct, upon looking at the footage, he's absolutely right. So if we're going to do form work, we want to make sure that we're filming as much as possible so that we're not ingraining the wrong types of strokes or the wrong movements, creating thus worse habits that we're going to have to unravel later. But I do think that there is a huge benefit to giving these shadow swings over and over again. I look at Josh, for example, who does at least 5 or 6 lessons, it seems like, a day. And during all of those lessons, he has his students standing up and we're going through the motions over and over again. I want you to feel how this should look, and Josh can make little tweaks and moments and changes there so that they get the feeling of what it should look like, and then he wants them to practice that technique over and over again. I think this is something that all effective coaches should be doing, and we want to make sure that our body gets into the right positions, because once we get into the right positions, position equals position, and we're going to find ourselves reaching the correct positions later on. So where does that leave you sitting in front of the screen right now? If you just want to head to a field and throw shots, let's say you throw 3 tee shots off of every single tee. Well, that's still only going to leave you with 54 practice strokes of throwing drives off the tee. And it's going to take you a really long time to implement that change, especially because those 54 shots are usually not going to be the same type of shot over and over again. Some are require turnovers, some are going to be pure hyzers. So the consistency that we're getting in our form is still differing even there. However, while you're sitting here watching a video, or you're browsing through YouTube, or you just have TikTok up and going, whatever your choice is, you could even during commercial breaks stand up and get 15 or 20 shadow swing reps in of going through your form motion over and over again until you find what feels right. We don't want to speed through those throws because we're trying to move as slow as we can to get the right motion rather than just hitting the motion. Now we could wrap the video right there and you could say, wow, Robbie, I guess that's an okay thing to say. But I want to give you some practical examples of what I've seen in my own shadow swings and ways that I implement shadow swings throughout my house in order to really drive home those pieces to help me try to translate that work over to the field, because I'm going to have way more opportunities to build habits doing shadow swings than I am to actually get out there and throw rounds or shots, because as we saw once again in the intro, the weather isn't going to always cooperate. I feel like a lot of people spend so much energy letting their form be all loosey-goosey and just hanging out there, and it's super wide, everything, and their limbs are just flinging everywhere. So shadow swing drill that I use personally to help me kind of tighten and bring things in is when I'm walking through doorways, I like to come and shadow mime, keeping everything together here tight. So my dogs, for instance, Lucy's ready to jump on me right here because I'll have you move for a second, sweet girl, thank you. And we come through the doorway, boom, and then we hit out. Through, boom, boom. The focuses of this are coming through the door, making sure that I jam into the brace, feel the stop there, and then that stop allows me to then throw the arm out for the later part of the throw. Once again, we have to keep the heart of the shadow swing in mind and make sure that we're practicing the correct motion. So even when we're going through a doorway or we're practicing things in general, practicing the wrong habit leads to the wrong form later on. A great example of this is for a long time when I did shadow swings, I would come through and then I would come to this hit point and I would focus this as a drill over and over again. So I would boom, feel the brace, boom, feel the hit. And probably if you go back and watch the footage of me talking like seconds ago, I probably even in that video had my hand in this jammed down position. The problem is if I follow this motion all the way to the end and I'm in this, I can have so many things correct about the form and the swing. But when I come to this hit point right here, notice I'm gonna freeze my hand in this hit point right here, bang. Now, if I take a disc and I try to put that disc in my hand at that release point that I'm holding, I'm releasing the disc like this. In no world am I ever going to release the disc like this out there. So when I get to the actual course, what's going to happen is I'm going to change how I'm releasing it, which means that I'm going to be throwing a different motion than I practiced. So we want to make sure that we are practicing as much of the actual motion as we can when we're doing our shadow swings. If I wasn't recording, I would never have caught these things. And if I wasn't moving slow enough, I also wouldn't have caught something like this. Therefore, when I'm going to release the disc, you'll see a lot of pros who release the disc like so. You can almost have it, they're holding it. They're gonna hold this motion until it hits even boom, they've hit that outward release point, and then as they follow through, as the disc comes around, you'll see a lot of pros with their hand outstretched behind them and it's still held in this like pointed down position because the disc is literally ripping out of their hand rather than them thinking about coming to this point and opening their hand and releasing the disc right there. Especially as newer players, when we focus on letting the disc rip out, we feel like it's going to create some inconsistent releases because sometimes we're going to grip lock it. Sometimes it feels like it's going to come out too early. So if we just release it at that hit point, then that's going to be great and we're going to get more consistent lines. And while that may work at the beginning, it isn't the best habit overall. So when we're doing our shadow swings, since we're trying to teach ourselves the right things, focusing on coming through to that hit point and Boom, even thinking about how your hand is positioned is going to help build the right habits and techniques so that these shadow swings are more effective. I obviously have to plug a product here, and I think the Flight Towel Original is actually very helpful for this. It does have the pocket built in for resistance when you're doing these drills over and over again. I want us to focus a lot less on getting the pocket to stop or snap or whatever, and just think about holding this fob in the correct position so that we can get that hand feel, that hand motion of trying to make sure that we're intentionally keeping the disc nose down. Super helpful for that. We'll obviously put the code for Flight Towels here below. Now, these are just two examples of things that I've seen within my own shadow swings as I feel like I'm doing proper work and trying to grind out the reps and get used to them. And yet I could arguably be using shadow steps against what I'm trying to do. So let's take the advice that Holyn Handley gave and how she was implementing form change and lay out the proper roadmap for us to be using as well. First, we want to be doing lots and lots of shadow swings before we ever actually even pick up a disc to even throw one into a net. The second is we want to make sure we are recording as much as possible. If you're watching this, you probably have access to a load of other content out there in terms of form correction, and most of you have a decent idea of what you should be doing because lots of coaches are saying it. But knowing it and doing it are two drastically different things, especially because we have to overcome the hard part of all of the reps and habits that we've built up in the past. So we need to make sure that we're constantly recording so that we have evidence, and that evidence is also going to be really helpful for you to go back and watch, hey, this is what my form looked like several months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, so that you can also feel proud of the improvement and accomplishments that you've made in just putting in the effort and the grind for the form work. After you've recorded and done the shadow swings, eventually you're gonna need to do, that's right, more shadow swings. We wanna make sure that this is almost subconscious what we're doing in our throws before we ever come to actually releasing the disc. And then once you do that, let's start throwing into a net. So that way we don't have to do the pain of going to the field where we find ourselves looking around wondering like, hey, I threw all these discs out here and I don't really know where they are, and maybe you're losing them or having a hard time. Or even if you find yourself in the field, it takes a lot less time to wipe the mud off your discs or the grass off your discs and all of the other things. And so just going to a field and throwing is honestly the last resort that we want to go to, because we aren't looking for guaranteed results in terms of, oh, that specific shot went far. If we correct our form and have the right form, this is going to be the groundwork or railroad tracks that we put ourselves on. And when we get that correct, all of our shots are going to come out looking amazing and great, rather than just going to a field throwing 50 discs and hoping that one or two of them look great and we can hang our hats on that. You can get way more reps in with the network, but if you find yourself in that network while you're still recording, that old form is creeping back in, stop what you're doing, go back to shadow swings, and you're gonna need to build those reps back up to get feeling and looking back to what we want to see. So hear me when I say this as we wrap the video up, that I do know this sounds really boring and really lame as a way to actually improve our game, because man, it's just not as exciting as getting out there and playing around, or it's just not as exciting as getting out there and scoring super well or throwing that huge monster drive. But if you're like me and you've played a lot of disc golf in the past, odds are there are a lot of bad habits that are standing the way between you and where you actually want to be with your game. And shadow swings are going to be one of the easiest ways for us to overcome and conquer those bad habits, to lay the groundwork for new and amazing you when it comes to your disc golf game. As always, I want to say thank you for watching and thank you for tuning in. I'm not normally the guy that does this, but we're like getting sneaky close to 50,000 subscribers, which is kind of crazy. So if you've been watching and you haven't hit that subscribe button, I would really appreciate it if you'd be willing to do that and hit the like button, because it does a lot for the video to help get this out to other people. In the meantime, I hope you have an amazing rest of the week and that you can make it fantastic for someone else too. But for now, we're gonna leave you with the birdie.